So in this video I wanted to cover how you can customize the mapping of database fields into the object, and I'm going to do that using the customers table. So if we have a quick look at the customers database table here, we've got customer ID, company name and contact name. Now what I want to do is split out the contact name. I want to get the first name and the last name. So rather than having that as one field, I just want to have two. So I've already created a customers collection and item, our record class. So you can see here we've got the contact name. So what I want to do is I could hook into the getter and the setter explicitly rather than using the automatic getter setter. So what I'm going to do here is on the set, get the first name and set the last name as well. So in the get, then we can also just join them back together. So in set, we'll set out the first name is going to be split it by a space. We probably would typically do a lot more validation than that, wouldn't we? But that'll do for the moment. And last name, get the second item. So this way, when this setter is set, we can just split it out and grab the fields, and then when we persist it to the database via this return, we can just put it back together. And so when it's saved, it will be saved as one field. So let's put the last name there. Now we don't really want to make that public, we just want that to happen internally, but we might want to make these public, I guess. Let's test that out. If we go back to our app here, we should be able to now, we don't have contact name, which is good, but we do want to dump out the first name and the last name. We should really call that contact first name, but anyway. First name, last name. Let's have a look. See if we've got that working. No, we don't. Okay. Cool, so now we've got the first name, last name there, which is great. And if we do save it, which I'll do here, we should see that it's going to save it as one field. It should save it as it was. You can see here it's updating it and setting the contact name equal to that full name there as well. So I'll just put a breakpoint here just to show you that it does what's actually happening. So if we have a look at the call stack here, we can see that it's actually, the crux of it is actually happening in what's called save fields and load fields. And you can actually override those two functions if you want to even get a little bit lower level, but I'll show that in a minute. So yeah, this one here is what's actually going to do the crux of the work. So by default, it's going to use the attributes to get the fields and set the fields, but you can do it in code. You don't need to use this field mapping at all. It's just that is actually optional. Anyway, so I think I've proven the point out there. So that might be all well and good, and you might be happy with that, but suppose that you want to actually have this as a separate class. You want to have a contact class, for example, and you want to have the first name, last name, and then you can reuse that if you want to in future. If you just want to make it a bit cleaner, so you do customer.contact.first name and last name. So you can do that too. You can set up what's called an object hook, which basically will, rather than looking through all of these fields in this class, will actually go through any subclasses or classes that have got this special attribute on it and set the mappings on them as well. So I'm going to do that too. What I'm going to do is going to move all these guys into a separate class. So let's create a new class here called contact. And it doesn't need any sort of special inheritance or anything like that. It just can be a class, normal class, and we can still use the field mapping. All we need to do in here is set up our contact. So we'll always set this to a new instance, contact, and we use the field mapping object hook. So that will go through, that will go into this contact object, And this is what it is important that we actually have this initialized in the constructor, because otherwise it won't work. This will be null, and you won't actually be able to map anything into it. But presuming that's set, it'll come into here and actually set this value for us. So if we go back to our application, we should now be able to type in contact.first name, which is a little bit nicer, I think. So let's have a look at that. Great, we can see that's working. Cool, so it worked just as before. That was pretty simple. We've refactored it out. Now we've got something that's probably a little bit more reusable. But there might be a little bit of an issue here, because sometimes you might have a contact class, and this contact name comes from a different field in a different table, and it might come from another field in another table. So what we're doing here, we're kind of binding the class to the field mapping. We don't really want to do that, because like I'm saying, it might come from a different data source, for example. So there's probably a couple of ways you could handle this. What I'm going to do is I'm probably going to override the save fields and load fields. And in here we can customize how that is actually loaded. So this save fields is actually doing all the work here. This is actually, when we do object save, it goes through and eventually calls this function here, and then we'll go through and use all the field mapping attributes. But we can add our own stuff in here. Like, we don't need to use attributes. If we just want to save some stuff, we just can do it in here. And conversely, with the load fields, we can just load some fields here if we need to. So this is also good for our example here, where we want to specifically manipulate some of that data. So this will contain all the field data values from that record. So we can go contact dot. We do need to make that internal. Contact name, and then we can just go fields, and we can index by the name, so we know it's contact name. There's a value on there, so we can essentially assign that value now directly to the contact name. And I'm not sure why it's working. I think I need to cast that. And also you can do the same thing here. So what I would do here is grab the fields. So this we can just reuse. This will then reuse the existing field mappings, but we also want to tack on some extra field mappings too, and we don't need that. So we can just we want to add in our custom field called contact name, and we want to set it to contact name. Okay, so now we set up the plumbing. We've decoupled the actual binding. We don't need to use the object hook anymore. It's just a normal class, but we've got full control here. So obviously you can do conditions, that you've got full control over. Sometimes you might want to grab it from here or there, or you might want to stick two fields together or whatever. So there's a lot of options here, because you're basically in code, so you're not limited by those field mapping attributes. So if we run that again, hopefully it will work exactly the same. It does. So I'll just do a breakpoint in here just to prove out that it actually is coming into here. And we can have a quick look at the fields. So we've got all the field values in here. We can see the customer ID, company name, etc. Okay, so this is one way of doing it. So that's pretty much it. So the essence of it is, if you override these two functions, load fields and save fields, you've got full control over how those fields are mapped into your objects. So that's pretty much it.